Irmgard Kuhn shocked readers with her 1931 best-selling novel, Gilgi, One of Us. This book portrayed numerous modern issues in such a striking way that it was banned by Nazi Germany shortly after written. Kuhn included topics like female independence, abortion, and the role of a single mother. Since the Weimar Republic at the time generally resented discussions about said topics, Gilgi caused some social tension in the country. In addition to breaking grounds in terms of legitimate social discussions, Gilgi offered something that could not even be offered by other modernists of the era, a woman's perspective in writing. For decades, readers familiarized themselves with the notion that this world is dominated by men. Irmgard Kuhn became one of the first to challenge this idea, and thus remains an influential literature figure in today's age. Kuhn's style of writing and portrayal of main character Gilgi expresses the growing independent mindset of women in the 1920s and 1930s. This striking trend differed greatly from the previous time period when women were mostly confined in traditional domestic roles. The 1920s in particular experienced an economic resurgence and found women participating in white-collar jobs in the workforce. To illustrate this, Gilgi is even quoted in the novel as saying, "I like the feeling of getting on by my own efforts." The idea of getting on by one's own efforts is a hallmark concept of individualistic American and European culture, but at the time, it only realistically applied to men. This foreign concept of a woman making her own living did not even cross the mind of the collective society until after Kuhn published Gilgi. In the beginning of the novel, Gilgi worked as a typist, making a large enough salary to make ends meet fairly comfortably. She was committed to leading a life of her own and not relying on a man like women were traditionally instructed to do. In addition to having a job, Gilgi worked out daily and engaged in other activities on her own. In the German Quarterly, Barbara Costa notes that, quote, "The modern woman that Kuhn fashions is rooted in the social context of Weimar optimism and rationalization associated with Germany's economic recovery in the mid-1920s." End quote. The modern woman mentioned by Costa is more synonymous with women of today's society than women of the decades leading up to the novel. Therefore, the noteworthy life portrayed by Gilgi contradicts the status quo and is a symbol for the increased independence felt by women in the 20th century. After meeting and falling in love with a man, Gilgi's independent lifestyle begins to conflict with the traditional household roles. There are multiple occasions where Gilgi's dependence on Martin, her boyfriend, gets the better of her and results in her feeling trapped inside the relationship. While older traditions would generally celebrate being bounded by a wealthy, loving man, Gilgi exposes the struggle as somewhat of a negative occurrence. Gilgi mentions that she dislikes waiting at home while Martin goes out and enjoys himself, citing that she wishes she could be doing the same thing rather than worrying about him. Other instances show Martin convincing Gilgi to stay at home rather than go claim the money she is owed, because he is afraid she will become sick. While these examples may show Gilgi failing to exhibit her independent nature to the extent she wishes to, Kuhn's writing views the struggle for independence as one that women should want to win. Since very few authors to date had even addressed the lack of independence as an issue at all, Irmgard Kuhn's perspective arguably helped steer Western culture towards granting women the unrestricted lifestyle they are able to enjoy today. Another traditional concept that Kuhn chooses to challenge is the possibility of having an abortion. Since society looked down upon abortions at the time, it is quite noteworthy that discussions involving abortion would make up such a significant portion of the plot. When Gilgi becomes unexpectedly pregnant, she spends a great deal of time talking about the prospect of aborting the child. Though she ultimately decides to keep it, the fact that this crossed her mind is extremely meaningful. Kirsten Barnt recognizes this significance, claiming that it, quote, "negotiates a space of women's agency within the constraints of contemporary reproductive policies and contemporary discourses revolving around overlapping notions of political, historical, and cultural crisis." End quote. In other words, Kuhn is able to recognize women as their own independent agent instead of the traditional thought that might suggest that there is no option when it comes to reproduction, or that it is even the man's choice. Regardless of the fact that Gilgi does not end up aborting her child, she does put the option in play, which was a largely unprecedented move at the time. This discussion is potentially something that attributed heavily to the novel being banned by Nazi Germany, and ultimately created discussion involving the topic. Once Gilgy made the decision to keep her child, she was faced with another decision: stay with the man she loved and potentially disappoint him with a life he did not want, or move out and attempt to make it on her own. In a move that clearly exemplifies a celebration of the independent woman, Gilgy decides to leave Martin and travel to the city of Berlin to live her life without a man. She chose a more difficult path, but as it is written near the end of the book, quote, "She'll make it. You can see in every line of her body that she'll make it. She knows what she wants, she'll see it through." End quote. This passage contains the thoughts of Pitt, Gilgy's closest friend, immediately after she tells him of her plans to move to Berlin. He assumes that Gilgy's incredible strength will prevail, which transitions into another rare concept of the time: the single mother. Society celebrates this person today, but that was not always the case. Throughout most of the 20th century, women did not often have jobs, making the possibility of raising a child without assistance this much more difficult. Similar to the issue of abortion, single motherhood was unpopular and disapproved by society as a whole. Just like they were not supposed to talk about abortions, women were not supposed to leave their wealthy, protective man in favor of an independent life in the city. Kuhn's writing, however, did not show regard for these social and cultural norms, proving to challenge the status quo on multiple occasions. The most common thread between discussions regarding women in white-collar jobs, women talking about abortions, and women becoming single mothers is their relation to the modernist movement. More specifically, they each symbolize old cultures and ideals coming to ruin. Just as other modernist authors wrote about this point for a large portion of the early to mid-1900s, Kuhn follows suit. In Nobles, Modernism, and the Culture of Fin de Siècle Munich, Triv Haas Ellison summarizes this movement as, quote, "Interest and support for the new, the willingness to grapple with societal change, the possession of an ingrained sense of self-confidence, and a willingness to accept a transitory process of becoming." End quote. Many of the topics of Kuhn's writing, particularly in Gilgy, express this willingness in regards to new ideas in society and progress for women. These new ideas threaten older ideals that society had already accepted, which is the main reason why Nazi Germany placed a ban on Kuhn's writing. Therefore, Kuhn undeniably acted as an impetus for social progress. In addition to breaking free from older traditions, Kuhn displays another modernist trait in Gilgy: blending high and low cultures. For example, near the beginning of the novel, Gilgy celebrates her 21st birthday. Much to her dismay, her mother decides to inform her that she was adopted from a family who did not possess nearly the amount of money her current family possesses. In this scenario, Kuhn blends the high culture of growing up in an extremely rich, well-educated family with the low culture of suddenly finding out that she was adopted from a family without wealth. Similarly, a relationship with the ideal man is blended with the complications of an unwanted pregnancy, the thought of abortion, and ultimately, the separation of the couple. In this sense, Kuhn echoes the work of T.S. Eliot, another modernist writer who is known for his ability to illustrate fragmentation through examples of abortion and loveless marriage. However, Kuhn diverges from other modernists like Eliot in her presentation of topics and unique endearment of the protagonist. While Eliot reiterates passages about fragmentation and waste, Kuhn maintains a mostly upbeat, optimistic style throughout her novels. Her brand of modernism advocates for female hope and power. The exploration of modernist themes, combined with the embracement of newfound power for women that Kuhn exhibits in Gilgy, helped this novel to capture the historical context of the time it was written. Taking place in the time period between World War I and World War II, this novel accompanied a tremendous amount of societal change, including the profound change in independence felt by women. Ultimately, Kuhn uses Gilgy as a means of creating her own style of forward thinking and writing that calls past beliefs into question and has influenced countless people in the way they think about European literature and women in general.